Grapevine Podcast, sponsored by Vineyard Magazine.
Welcome to the Grapevine Podcast. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And it's good to be here.
Yeah, a bit tired from a long journey because I know you just bought something brand new that you probably shouldn't have, or that you told me you wouldn't.
It's not brand new.
Okay.
It's 2002.
Right.
I have an addiction.
Yes.
I have to admit.
Yeah. How many do you have now? Before you tell the people what it is.
It's somewhere between 9 and 11.
I thought it was less than that. I actually thought it was less than that.
No, there's a few more in storage.
You've got a fleet.
A fleet.
Yeah, that's what you could call it now, a fleet of them.
Yeah.
So,
but the good thing is, it's not drugs, it's not alcohol.
No.
It's all quite, and other people enjoy my obsession.
So some people have addictions like cigarettes, like alcohol maybe, but you have an addiction for cars, in particular Land Rovers.
I do.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's beside the point.
Yeah.
So apart from being a Land Rover addict, tell us about yourself. So what's your backstory, your history? Because would you say you're the owner and founder of Itasca Wines? Is that right?
Yes, in a nutshell. Although we do have a number of investors, who are all great people. I don't think I know all of them personally, but the ones I do, they're nice, great people, very supportive of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Love their wine, and I think when we started this, I never realised how expensive the wine industry or setting up a winery could be.
Right.
And obviously everything is high quality stainless steel, almost food grade, medical grade, that type of thing. So everything is extortionately expensive.
Yeah.
But having said that, we now have another side, our technical services, that we're now importing presses and tanks and things and selling to other wineries. And Schaffenberger, who make fantastic presses, they're a German company, and when they invited me over to tour around the factory, the detail and the engineering that is in these machines is just phenomenal. So you can see where the money goes.
Right.
It's not, you're not buying something cheap.
It really lends itself to your personality though as well, if you think about it, because you don't do things by half ever. And if you're going to do them, you either do them or you don't, and there's nothing in between.
I suppose that's a good comment. Yeah.
That's a compliment.
Compliment. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not cheap. My daily rate, I'm bar mitzvahs, weddings, I'm available, but
you can find the rate. Cheap. You can find the rate card on the website.
Yeah. No, I think. Well, I grew up with my dad was an engineer, very very skilled man. He did a 7-year apprenticeship with Rolls-Royce.
7 years apprenticeship. See, these days that's unheard of.
Yeah,
people don't do apprenticeship.
I think he was 16 when he went to Rolls-Royce.
Yeah.
And, as flat as this table is, you could have a sheet of stainless steel, aluminium and everything. And I saw him as a child growing up make that to be, a wing of a car.
Yeah.
With no more than an oxygen acetylene, round bottle, wooden hammers, and he had this famous tool he called it his flipper, and basically it was the spring off an old lorry that he'd shaped, and it was curved and things, and he could use that to bash the metal and things. And it was people like him, and tool makers nowadays. The skill is phenomenal. So I have got a great appreciation of not only Land Rovers, but the engineering that goes into the equipment that is in wineries.
Right, fair enough.
Wineries.
Yeah. So you say that was a real influence on you. It sounds like it was, because you see that's a real DIY way of doing things. But back in the day, that was just par for the course.
Well, for me growing up, it was, I was around, very skilled people, because my father worked with very skilled people, and these guys had, done long apprenticeships like he had. So I suppose as I grew up and got into work myself, and I grew up on a Sunday afternoon watching black and white John Wayne films, John Wayne cowboy films.
Right.
And that was really where the love of filmmaking developed. And then I was very fortunate at school that one of my best friends, Simon, his father, was an art director, Peter Merton. He's got credits on a lot of the early James Bond films and things like that. So he was in, as the art director, work with the production designer. He would design the film sets and then build them with the construction managers and crew and that sort of thing. So, I was very fortunate. Simon at school, his son, my close mate, even I remember at the age of sort of 13, I think, he would draw these spaceships and things, and they were just incredible. I mean, I couldn't draw a crooked line, let alone a straight one, but he drew these fantastic things, and he went on to and he has, still today, got a very successful career in major Hollywood films.
Okay.
He moved to LA and stuff like that, but he did, Pinewood Studios, Batman and things like that. He actually designed the Will Smith iRobot.
Did he?
Yeah. So he drew that, and he was drawing things like that, super high standard when we were kids, So
it's interesting because we haven't met, but somebody once described me as looking like iRobot.
Well, we met in 2009, if I remember.
Yeah, 2009. Yeah, that long ago.
I don't remember thinking there's a robot.
You didn't?
No.
Okay,
no,
but now,
yeah.
now, yeah.
Well, we all change with time.
Okay, but that was your upbringing. That influenced you because you've got a very strong engineering background, basically, and a construction background too, which then lent itself into the jobs you went into movies.
I was through Simon and his dad. Well, not through Simon, but he went straight into movies, big movies, with his father. His father helped me get in. I mean, I wouldn't argue or get into that political conversation nowadays whether it's good or bad. But when I was 16, so I started in 76 in my first film.
I won't say how long.
No, but it was a while ago.
Yeah.
So in those days, the industry was very unionised.
Yeah.
And it had a crazy situation that you weren't allowed in a film studio. I'm not sure how it was for TV, but I went straight into big feature films.
Yeah.
And then moved later into TV and things. But in those days, you were not allowed into the studio unless you were a union member.
All right.
But you weren't allowed, but you had to have worked in the industry for 6 months before you could apply to the union.
That sounds like that's a real catch-22. How'd you get the 6 months?
Complete lockout. You weren't allowed in the studio because you weren't a member.
Yeah.
But you had to have worked for 6 months before you could get membership.
That makes no sense.
No. It was a complete lockout, closed shop.
So it's really about who you know then.
Totally.
Right.
Totally. And I think, nowadays, education has changed drastically since I left school. It's about life today is still about who you know in many terms rather than what you know.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Doors get opened.
Yeah. Well, they say business is about people. It's not about money. Really.
Yeah.
It's
no,
about
I mean
people.
even with my own son and daughter, who are both in film and TV. Their mother was a teacher. I don't know why they didn't follow that route. Certainly more stable in the early years as an income.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in their early days, I was able to open the door, speak to a producer, a production manager, get them through the door. Once they went through the door, that was entirely up to them.
Yeah.
You can't then do that. And I think that happens in all walks of life.
Yeah.
So.
Well, my son right now, he's 21, he's looking for work. And I happened to meet somebody last year at a business conference and talk to her. And she's a managing director of some major blue chip company. Yeah. And I've got a conversation with her tomorrow about helping him get his first job. And I think that's just, it is what it is. It's the way it is. And I think some people wouldn't like it to be that way. But,
it's reality.
It's it's the way it works.
Yeah.
So I hear you, I understand. Anyway, before we go off on a philosophical conversation about, the way the world is these days, come back to the point. So let's go back to the point where you're the owner and founder of Itasca Wines. Is that right? I mean, maybe not owner, but definitely the founder.
Yeah, I mean, we've got investors, other shareholders, so I'm not the owner. I am the major shareholder.
But it was your idea.
It was my idea.
Yeah.
But it came around in a funny way. And
Yeah.
you know very much because you were there.
Yes. But tell the story anyway.
Well, I'd moved up through through my career, and I actually got a job doing a film. Well, actually, it was a pilot series, so you call it you make it as a mini film.
Yeah.
But it was 1 hour long episode for the BBC. It was in Birmingham, based out of Pebble Mill, as it was then. A lot of people will know Pebble Mill.
Yeah, I remember it.
That was 99, and I had a great time. I mean, it starred Jack Dee, John Thompson. It was a detective series.
Right.
Unfortunately, I think there was a mix-up. I would really call it a cock-up on the BBC's part.
Yeah.
That they didn't contract John Thompson.
Right.
For the ongoing series if the pilot we made was successful.
Okay.
And by the time they'd got ready, and it was called Street Life, and it was a great little 1 hour thing.
You can probably find it on YouTube.
Yeah, well, it was never released.
Wasn't
it's
it?
probably in the archives at the BBC somewhere.
Oh, buried in a library somewhere.
Yeah,
right.
it was great. And anyway, by the time they got ready, they got it all ready, and it was ready to be broadcast. And then obviously execs had seen it, and it was going to go on to be broadcast and then be followed by a series if the reaction was good. John Thompson had gone to do Cold Feet.
Right.
And ITV had contracted him, so he was not going to be available.
Yeah.
So they canned the whole lot. They never showed the pilot.
Wow. So did you ever see it?
Yeah. I've got a copy of it. It's great. Yeah, it's great. I could probably sell that for quite a lot of money.
I think that might be a little
probably
gold mine.
By the BBC.
I don't know. I mean, it's that long ago
anyway,
now.
So without waffling on too long,
go on.
I did that, and I was the location manager on it.
Okay.
It was great. There was hundreds of different locations, but we had a motorbike chase. We had a motorbike come off the roof of the Sea Life Centre in Birmingham into the canal. There was jet skis racing through Birmingham City Centre Canal. I
can't think that, to be honest with you, if that was to happen these days, the way you did it now, it wouldn't happen today.
No, probably been done on green screen or something.
Well, not just that. I've got a funny feeling maybe because the health and safety executive, good God, but wouldn't have been around.
Yeah.
Then.
So it had all sorts. It was great fun to make, hard work, and we had to make it in a very short period of time. Anyway, I did that. And I did all the locations on it. It was very successful. The BBC were then starting, and we started in September, finished just before Christmas. Beverly Dartnell, bless her, she's now sadly died at the age of probably about 58, something like that. She was a lovely lady. She'd gone from school at 17 straight to the BBC in Birmingham.
Right.
Worked her way up. She was probably early 40s when I met her.
Yeah.
And so she'd been BBC all her life.
Yeah.
She was a lovely, wonderful, warm woman, and very good at her job. Anyway, we finished that, and she said we're starting a new series in January 2000, daytime series called Doctors.
Right.
And would you like to come back and work and do all the locations on it for us?
Yeah.
Bear in mind, I'd never worked in Birmingham before. I had no idea of the surrounding areas of Birmingham city centre and everything.
Yeah. So of course you went, I can do that.
Well, as a lot of people who are freelance will know, working in January, February, March,
it's the dead
certainly
months.
in the film, as in TV, it's you're never in work.
No, right.
So to go back on the 2nd of January and have a job like that and it was a 6-month contract, was great. So I ended up doing that, and it was supposed to run for about a year and a half. They ended the series in December 23 last year.
That was last
so it
year.
Ran for 23 years. Yeah,
that's a long run series.
And I did over 1,000 episodes. And so for 2006 through to 2008, I actually moved from doing the locations to directing the show as well.
Right.
So I was a director on Doctors, as well as on the side going and directing pop videos and a few other things. I'd moved on into that area. But they'd obviously had enough of me by 2008 and they sacked me.
Well, on that note, hold that thought. I'll come back to you in a minute.
Raise your glasses because it's time to toast our advertisers.
So you were saying you became a director on Doctors?
Yeah, and it was, I know it was a daytime show, and a lot of people sort of poo-pooed, oh, it's just a daytime drama, and they're done cheaply, which they are, and everything. But I think some of the people I work with there, a lot were ex-BBC, they've been made redundant and then come back as freelancers. A lot had always been freelance, and there was a few people I knew from working together on other projects in London and places. All very talented, people, and we all knew our stuff, I think. So I think we took pride in actually, it was a low budget series. Yeah. But we took pride in really making it look like
the best it could.
Yeah, the best we could, and like it was a massive budget, and and I think certainly we in many episodes we succeeded. Yeah. And it was a great series. Yeah. I couldn't knock it. Yeah. But as I said, it got to 2008, and they didn't sack me as such, but I didn't want to leave, and as I said, I'd done 1,000 episodes, but they should have got rid of me, in all honesty, probably 2 years before they did, because I got tired, and a lot of the crew who'd been there, was only a few of us left, had been there from day one. Right. You need fresh blood, you need fresh ideas, you need things like that. My contract basically came to an end, and they just said, we're not going to renew, which was the right decision from their point of view, looking back on it. Yeah, but at the time, I can imagine it was a bit of a blow. At the time, as I say, they should have got rid of me 2 years before, but I had a son and a daughter at university. And it was, and the income was nice. Income was very nice, okay. And I was on a very good package. Yeah. I think I hung on too long. They allowed me to hang on too long. Yeah. Anyway, it came to an end. So, fortunately, I didn't have to go out and immediately get some work. I had a few quid in the bank. Yeah. And I was lying on the sofa one night and fell asleep, woke up, and there was some wine programme about, wine. About wine. Right. Yeah. And I've always been a lover of wine. You know, when we were younger, you probably did it yourself. The tallest one of your mates would try and go in the pub at 15 and get a pint of beer. Oh, absolutely. For all of us. Some of us couldn't pass. We had a little bit of bum fluff. That's it. Not the real, didn't look 18. Still struggling with it today. Yeah. I should have shaved. Sorry, apologise, audience. You have nothing to apologise. Look at the state of this. So, you did all those things. Anyway, I was never able to drink much beer. It had a reaction with me. I love a pint of beer, but I can never drink much more. Right. Pint and a half, something like that. So I went into wine at a very early age. Yeah. Sort of 15, 16, started drinking wine. And then just became, as you earn more money, you get older, your career, your salary goes up, you can afford better wine. Right. So you started to stock a cellar. Well, not quite, but I remember when I first got married, we had a guy down the road who was a wine merchant, and he would come round and he'd bring round several bottles of wine. Right. He was trying to just flog me his wine. Of course. But we used to have some great evenings, and I started to learn from him a bit of about wine. So I drank better wine as my career went on, and just really got into it. But this programme, at 3 a.m, when I woke up, I thought, what is this? I should have gone straight to bed, but watched it. And the next day, I was moaning to Karen, my wife. She said, you came to bed very late. And I said, well, I woke up and watched this terrible, terrible programme. Anyway, apparently I moaned about this wine programme for weeks. Till eventually I was told, stop going on about that programme. Yeah. And if you want to do, have a decent wine program, make it yourself. Right. You're someone in a position to do it. Yeah, that sounds like you as well. Yeah, you just go on and on and so everyone goes, just do it. Yeah. So I thought, right, sod it, I will. Yeah. So I called up my colleagues, like Tom Hines, who's a fantastic cameraman. Yep. Brilliant. Tom, Tom very well. Yeah, fantastic. Worked guy. Together for a long time, sound recordist, and a few other people. And we got together, and I said, right, guys, this is what we're going to do. And okay, all right, great. How are we going to fund it? What we're going to do? Well, the natural thing was to go back to the BBC. Yes. So we went back to the BBC, and Mal Young, who was actually head of drama at that stage, he saw me, and he said, "Well, it's not really a drama series.
Yeah.
It's more documentary style."
Yeah.
And he was all drama. Anyway, he put me in touch with the right people, opened the doors. It was
There
up to me to go through the door again.
Yeah.
So I went through the door to really walk into a brick wall of resistance.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't something that they were really attracted to, But eventually we overcame a few problems and had several meetings, and then they did decide that, yes, okay, they could see what I was going on about, and we would do it. But then I went to a meeting to get things signed off, I would say, and they introduced me to a producer. They wanted to run the show effectively. She would be I was going to direct the show and write the show.
Yeah.
She would be the boss effectively.
Yes.
And so really nice lady. She'd only been at the BBC 2 or 3 years, and in conversation it came up that she didn't drink.
And you're going to make a wine program with a producer who doesn't drink.
Well,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I've got nothing against people that don't drink.
No, of course. That's their choice.
Yeah, that's
what
it is. But to put a producer on a wine show where you're going to be travelling, and in those days the concept was 12 one-hour programs, and each one-hour program was a different country around the world.
Yeah.
We ended up with Australia, New Zealand, Spain, Germany,
South Africa,
and all the bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And the audience need to know, Mike knows as much about it as I do, because he was not only the cameraman with Tom on it, he was also a producer with me on it, and the editor.
Yeah.
So
that's why I've got the beard.
Yeah, you've been editing it with me for
a long time.
A long time.
Yes.
But I just said to the BBC, "I'm sorry, guys, but this is not going to work."
Yeah.
And they couldn't see why. And I said, well, the other thing they wanted was they had a list of well-known presenters, celebrities presenters, and they wanted them to do it. And I said, look, the reason there are no programs about wine on TV is one, people go on about, I can smell the raspberries and it's a chocolate flavour and all that. Cookery programs that I'd been moaning about, every channel had bloody cookery programs on. I do like them.
Yeah.
They are great. But you can go down the supermarket, buy the ingredients, go home, and everybody can try and cook.
That's right.
You can't go in the supermarket, buy some grapes, tread on them, and make some wine.
No.
It doesn't work that way.
I think people try, but it doesn't work.
I'm sure there's been a few who have tried. Yeah. So trying to come up with an idea how we could make this an interesting program rather than people just sniffily talking about I can smell the vanilla in the glass and stuff like that was never going to work. So the idea was it was a people program.
Yeah.
It wasn't about wine.
Yeah.
It's a people program,
Yeah.
and it's about ideally the winemakers around the world, and the people that work in the wineries and process
and the lifestyle
and all that sort of stuff. So I thought I'm walking into, let's say, Australia. I'm in the Barossa Valley, just beautiful place, just north of Adelaide. They make some fantastic Shirazes, which is one of my favourites.
Yeah, and if I remember rightly, you got me hooked on one.
I did. Yeah. Spinifex.
That's it. Yeah,
Spinifex, fantastic Australian.
Yeah, he just walked into the edit one day with a bottle and said, "Here, Mike, try that." And then ever since then, that's it. I'm done. I'm sold. I was on the Spinifex. We had some
good nights, didn't we?
We did have some good nights.
Into the early hours of the morning.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Drinking wine.
I think the editing process took a lot longer than it probably should have done.
It did. Yeah.
But anyway,
But I didn't want a celebrity presenting the programme because, with all due respect to some fantastic celebrities and presenters style people that we have, and I actually know 2 or 3 personally, and they're great people, but we would have to give them the questions. And that wasn't going to work for me, and that's why we felt that some of those style wine programmes before had failed. So the idea was that we find a winemaker that can travel around and be the presenter on the show.
Yeah.
And when you walk into, say, an Australian winery, and he meets the other winemaker, who we're there to film.
Yeah.
You get winemaker talking to winemaker.
Yeah.
They will both open up.
Yes.
And certainly the Australian guy we've gone to interview, he's going to open up because it's like I'm talking to someone that understands.
That knows what that knows what they're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they feel far more comfortable that way. Yeah. It's like having a soccer pundit talk to a soccer player.
Yeah. And even in Spain, or Argentina where we were going in places, even if David, who ended up being our presenter, didn't speak Spanish.
Yes.
It's
the language of wine, right?
It's the language. Yeah, it's the wine language. They would know.
Yeah.
And to be honest, you can travel around the world, as we found out, and go to any winery.
Yes.
And I would say 90% of the people working in that winery speak English.
Mm-hmm.
Because what they do is they learn their trade by travelling around the world.
Right.
You've got you haven't. Yes, you have. You have a friend, Lucinda.
That's right.
Lucinda's now a great winemaker.
Yeah.
She's coming into a podcast with
she
us
is.
soon.
That's right, yeah.
Lucinda's an Italian background.
That's right.
But she speaks
fluent English
as well as Italian.
Yeah.
Because when she's travelled doing, her learning her trade, she will go into a Spanish winery or an Italian winery, and she'll meet people from New Zealand, from Australia, from South Africa, from Argentina, from Brazil. These guys learn their trade, and they learn different styles of winemaking by travelling around and doing a harvest in each different country. Mm-hmm. We've just finished Harvest 23, and 3 of our sort of students, I suppose they were mature students that were working with us.
Yeah.
I think one's gone to work in Spain, 2 have gone to Australia, and 1 to New Zealand.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so they're doing a harvest over there.
Yeah.
I think one that's doing South Africa.
Right.
They harvest in March. Mm-hmm. She'll be back to do harvest again with us in September 24.
Yeah, and then bring knowledge from that place back over here, and it's a world. Industry. And I think that's what you were saying you were trying to aim at, which is what the programme was about, which is Cellar, by the way, which is what we're talking about. Yeah. The idea behind it, like you said, was to see the people and follow these people and their journeys and their stories about the wine, rather than, like you said, swilling wine, sniffing it, doing that kind of thing. You can't do that on TV.
No. But I suppose we ought to get back to the Grapevine's aim, really, is to talk about English wine. We're going a little bit off on a tangent.
We're really talking about your background and why you came to...
Yeah, but Cellarats, I suppose Cellarats led us to where we are today.
It did.
In a very, unconventional circle.
It did. So, no, keep going.
And that was that we'd been to Australia, we'd been to New Zealand and stuff, and we were due to go, as you know, because you were coming, we were supposed to go to Lebanon.
We were,
And unfortunately, I love Lebanese wine, and the Bakker Valley and everything was so interesting, in the history of Lebanon. Not many people know, but back in the sort of 50s, Lebanon, Beirut was like Monaco. That you've got the sort of Mediterranean, and Lebanon was like Monte Carlo.
So I didn't know that. That's something new for me.
Yeah, it was.
That's fascinating.
It was where a lot of celebrities went, film stars. All they even had. I think they had early film festivals like the Cannes Film Festival
in Beirut.
Yeah, in Beirut. Beirut was a very cosmopolitan city.
It's not the story we've been told these days.
No, sadly, it's not like it obviously was.
But then you talk about the area as well, just to kind of digress slightly, because I know that from my little understanding of wine, you're far more into it, that, you got Lebanon in the area there, but Georgia, and not Georgia, US, Georgia
which is a little bit
further north. Yeah. But it's almost like the founding state of wine. It's like that's pretty much where a lot of it stemmed out from.
Well, I'm not too up on the history, but certainly Georgia has got a claim to early makings of wine.
But anyway,
but what that brings us back to with Cellarats is we couldn't afford to go.
Yeah.
I booked you, I booked Tom, everybody, and obviously because they're freelance, once they book in their diary, it was a situation of they're all friends of mine.
Yeah.
So I would be letting everybody down, going guys, sorry, I'm cancelling. You're out of work, and I didn't want to do that. We had a certain amount of money, but not
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I said, I've been looking at the English wine industry, and bear in mind this was 2018, wasn't it?
18, it's about that 19, then,
yeah. It's really on a vertical, sort of trajectory. So why don't we do an episode on England or UK wine?
We'll be back shortly. We're just going to check the cellar for a new bottle. Welcome back to the Grapevine Podcast, sponsored by Vineyard Magazine.
So we didn't have enough money to go to Lebanon. So you went, why don't we do one on the UK? Because it's, you like the pun, the lowest hanging fruit. Come on, give me that one.
You're getting worse.
That's a dad joke, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a bad joke.
Okay, yeah. Right, yeah.
So I think everybody was disappointed. Oh shit, we were going to go to Lebanon. What a great trip, and all the rest of it. And I think I'd given you all some Chateau Bizarre to start with.
I think I remember that.
Yeah, and everyone said, "Oh wow!" And I said, "Guys, we'll be drinking buckets of it." So and there's Messiah, and there's some other places to go. Anyway, we ended up at Hadrian's Wall.
We did, didn't we?
We did, didn't we? Do you remember?
Yeah. How's that happen?
Well, in the research, so we're not going to Lebanon, we're going to do the UK. So I had to do some research, and I was writing the sort of layout of the programmes. And I thought, well, we need to start with English wine. How long has English wine been here? Why is it so good now? And why wasn't it good previously?
Yeah, why did it glow like Del Boy's bottle?
Yeah. So I thought, well, it's sort of accepted that the first vines were brought to the UK by the Romans. And it was the Romans that grew vines in the UK. We don't know what the weather really was like in those days. But obviously they made some wine. It probably was pretty disgusting. So the most famous part of the UK that everybody knows, the Romans, is Hadrian's Wall.
Yes.
I suppose we need to mention that by then we'd been talking to our distributors because we'd raised money to invest. I probably forgot to mention that we didn't go with the BBC.
No.
Because it wasn't going to work.
No. Well, not with a producer who didn't drink.
No, and they had different ideas. They had a bigger crew, and there was 5 of us really that were pretty. We could cover everything. We were slick. We all carried camera bags and everything, and did everything, didn't we?
The smaller crew definitely. Yeah. Well, I mean, I say it worked better. We didn't have the chance to work with a bigger crew to see if it would, but it was a much more. Easier crew to handle. We could move from place to place very quickly.
Well, our conception, if you remember, was always, smaller and slicker.
Yeah.
And we didn't have that amount of money to pay to have a big crew, did we? We
not at all.
We were doing what we could.
Yeah.
We walked away from the BBC. We raised money through family, friends, and some investors, and that's how we funded the entire thing. And we've been at the end of the day, you've got to make these programs and sell them. So we've been talking to distributors, and they'd all said, David's fantastic. David Thomas, great winemaker. Had moved away, funnily enough, from actually making wine. He was more in sales.
Yes.
And he's now a European head of sales for Bordeaux Index. He deals in the very high ends of the wine industry.
Yes.
So but David came on as our presenter. Was just so natural in front of the camera, wasn't he?
He was brilliant.
Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah. He'd never done anything before. We said,
No.
right, this, blah, blah, blah. And he just walked away with it, didn't
Considering that you took a punt on the guy, I mean,
Yeah.
yes, he was a brilliant expert, but whether or not it's two different things. Being able to be an expert in something, but being able to present it well, they're very different. And he did both. Brilliantly.
He did. Right from the first camera test,
Yeah.
that we did with him.
He
He
did,
was
yeah.
just a natural. But the distributors, as good as he was, they said, guys, you've got to make it slightly more attractive. So, okay, politically, how do we do that?
How do we do that?
You bring in a female,
Yeah.
and actually they were right in the end, because what we ended up doing, we found someone that I already knew, but it was a really wonderful lady, great presenter as well. We're going back to having to have a presenter, which we didn't want.
No.
But the way it worked was, we got Gemma to be that audience. So people watching TV, when David is saying, well, there's a lot of tannings in this, Gemma would be the one going, and we can all hear the audience. Yeah, what's tannings?
Yeah.
And then we sort of worked it that if you were the audience at home screaming at the TV, what's tannings? I don't know what the hell tannings are.
Yeah.
So Gemma was the audience, and a very attractive lady, asking those questions, putting David on the spot, and the winemaker he was interviewing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it worked brilliantly, didn't it?
Oh, no, it was great.
It worked really well.
Yeah, it was real chalk and cheese, and it worked very well. Like you said, you got the balance of Gemma, who knew nothing about wine, but was as equally fascinated by it.
Yeah.
And David, who was just the expert, but would go off sometimes talking technical things that I know that maybe you might have understood, but quite a few of us were just scratching our heads going, we don't know what he's talking about anymore. And Gemma did a good job of pulling him back on that.
Yeah, she did a brilliant job. Yeah, so she was getting David to simplify the answers.
Yeah.
So the audience, me included, a lot of the time.
Yeah.
I learned so much in those 3 or 4 years we did it.
Yeah.
She was getting him to explain
Yeah.
the dummies like me.
Yeah. So there we are at Hadrian's Wall, wondering why we're not in Lebanon. And we threw Gemma into an airplane, if I remember right. Just
we did.
because we thought it'd be fun.
It was almost a microlight, wasn't it? She was petrified.
Yeah, I don't think those wings were too fixed.
No, no. So we had Gemma fly along the almost half the length of Hadrian's Wall, and she was then going to do a voiceover about the Romans and things like that.
Yeah, a bit of the background to it.
Yeah, and we were doing that, and then to cut a long story short, we ended up coming back to where we're based, and by then we'd moved into offices here at Pencroft Farm in Hampshire, mainly because I'd closed my office in Soho that I'd had for.
Yeah.
I had a locations business.
Yeah.
I've been in Soho since 1982.
Yeah.
But I got fed up with travelling into London. Some of my crew that worked for me there were a lot of ladies. They were getting married, getting pregnant. It didn't, and things were changing. In those days, I would go out and photograph, a valley or a stately home, and then get back. We'd have the photographs developed. You'd cut them up. You'd stick them together with sellotape.
Yeah.
Put them on presentation boards.
Yeah.
That was all going. Everything was digital. So it was like, email me this, email me that. So technology had changed drastically. So there was no need for an office in Soho. So I'd moved to the Pencroft here, where Simon Porter and his family own the farm. They've been here for, I think, 4 generations.
Yeah.
And we'd rented the old kiln, as it is, turned it into offices.
Yeah.
And it's a great place to be.
Yeah.
And we came back from Hadrian's Wall, and Simon came over and said, "Oh, how'd it all go, guys?"
Yeah.
And I jokingly said it was great, but we'd been to other wineries as well, not just Hadrian's Wall.
Yeah.
Simon, you've got to rent me a field. And it was like, why do you want a field?
Yeah.
I think we should plant some vines.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of my thinking when I'm driving. I do a lot of driving, quite a lot of substantial travel. And whilst driving back from various places, I thought, wouldn't it be great to actually see a field full of corn, cut the corn, plant the vines, and film it from start to finish. So planting the vine to seeing that or those grapes,
like the harvest.
those grapes in a bottle.
Yeah. Yes.
So ground to bottle.
Ground to bottle.
Effectively. And we could do it on stop motion, and we'd film it over 3-4 years, however long it took, and condense it into 15 minutes. And that was all. That's all the concept was.
Yeah, that was all it was, Malcolm. Yeah, wasn't it? That was all it was.
That's all it was.
And as is your way, as is with you, things are never that simple.
Well, to be honest, on that occasion it was. And I think, like everybody that I've got to meet, and some wonderful people, that they think, English weather's changed. They see that people are planting grapes.
Yeah.
A lot of people across the UK. I'm really talking about Kent, Sussex, East and West, Hampshire, Wiltshire, Dorset, Camel Valley down in Cornwall. Across the south, really. The weather has changed so drastically that the pioneers that planted in Biddington in Kent in the 60s, people thought they were completely nuts. They probably agree, they probably still are. But they were nuts. They were never going to make any decent wine. But thank God those guys were pioneering, because they are responsible for the great industry that the UK wine industry now is.
Yeah, they're responsible for the reasons why you've done it. That's really, because you like to lay the blame elsewhere. So
yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. But Simon sort of laughed and everything.
Yeah.
But the intention was purely to condense 5 years into 15 minutes, make a program.
Yeah.
And also, as part of the Cellar sort of thing, we could then explain the whole process all the way through of how wine is made.
Yeah.
And why you can't just get some grapes out the supermarket.
Yeah, put them in a bucket and start stomping away.
And then put the juice in and, and that's it. So, Simon laughed a little bit, and actually he came back, to be fair, he's responsible a little bit. He came back a few days later and said, "Were you really serious?" And I, by then, had said, "Yeah, I was." So Simon had a friend who lived in France and had already been round and sort of said to him, "Simon, some years before, you should plant some vines." And he'd never done it, and so Simon had already had a good idea of a field that they'd driven to before, and we went there, and it's south facing, got two nice elevations, and Simon said, "Well, we could plant them here, and it fits everything." So I don't know how, but I think I persuaded him, but he didn't take a lot of persuading, to be honest. He said, "I've been growing, wheat, barley, maize, oilseed rape for 40 plus years.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to grow something different."
Well, hadn't he also he'd had an ambition to do it anyway, really?
He personally had thought about it before, via his friend from France.
Yeah.
And Simon's a pioneering farmer, because he has not ploughed a field in what's now probably 22 years or something.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we've had Simon on the previous podcast, talking about his biodiversity, I think it is, or whatever they call it.
Yeah,
but
conservation agriculture.
Conservation agriculture. You know the words. I don't know the words. That's clever.
For dyslexic,
I know. That's pretty good for you. And I did the podcast. But he is, he's a fascinating man. He's a very intelligent guy, and he's got very they're not different ways of doing things, but he's got a very entrepreneurial, pioneering way of doing things.
He has. The first thing I'd say is he's a wonderful man, very spiritual, but he's a really lovely guy, and I would regard him as a close friend now, not just someone who
got into business with,
as my landlord, as he was, still is really. But anyway, we formed a sort of a real bond between us, I think, and he was interested in growing something new. I was interested in filming and having an opportunity. And I'd never thought about planting a vineyard until those sort of driving back to here days. So we madly went ahead, and nobody tells you. I'm sure Simon thought, he doesn't realise. I'm sure Simon knew the cost of these things.
What's he getting into?
But that's not me. I mean, I'm just plough on and let's make it happen and make it work.
I can second that.
Yeah. Whereas Simon is probably more cautious. He must have known the cost. I had no idea. For me, it was just, we'll worry about it when we have to. So we planted the vineyard, and that again was tough, because we've planted, I mean, the field is 12 acres. I think we've planted about 9.5, 10 acres of the field.
Right.
Because of Simon's conservation agriculture, and he wasn't going to allow machine planting because it burrows too deep into the soil.
Yeah.
So we ended up planting 9,500 vines by hand.
Okay.
So it took a while to do.
Yes.
But Simon and I both did it as well.
It's a lot of elbow grease.
Yeah. So we called in Vine Care, Paul Woodrow Hill, who we now have a great relationship with. Paul was the one out of everyone we spoke to in those days that got Simon's, his philosophy of not ploughing.
Right.
So that's why we went with Paul, and he's been a supporter ever since. But again, as you say, Simon was a very unique farmer, because like the guys that planted in Biddington in Kent in the 60s, Simon many years ago decided he was going to stop ploughing his fields. So his innovative ideas were, when we planted, well, it's going to cost us £300,000 over the next 3 years to buy the narrow gauge tractors, the equipment and stuff like that. But I've already got all that on the farm.
Okay.
So why don't we plant the vines 4 metres apart?
Yes.
The rows 4 metres apart.
Yeah.
I think we ended up 4 metres apart and 1.8 metre, per vine as they go down.
Yeah.
Simon said he believed that he'd looked up. He actually went down and went to Plumpton. He did a sort of senior person's Plumpton course, which I completely take my hat off to him.
Oh, fair play!
And I took the mickey out of him, something wrong.
I bet you did.
For doing that. They must have thought he was the old grey teacher.
They probably all turned up and thought he's taking the class.
Yeah. But no, bless him. He went and did that. But he came back and he had this idea that he'd obviously learnt about downy mildew and other technical terms and things for disease and stuff. So he thought that, one, we would save money by having using the existing tractors, but 4 metres apart, maybe disease wouldn't jump across the rows so much.
Right.
And by being wider, the wind would blow through. The angle of the sun would maybe better,
right?
Because it's not got to be so narrow on normal 2 metre apart. So that's how we planted, and I have to say, 4 years later, for me, he's proved to be absolutely right.
Yeah.
And Ben Smith, our winemaker, has praised him as well, in the fact that the quality of our grapes has been fantastic.
Yeah.
And we've had less disease and things like that than some other people.
Don't let him see this.
No, don't let him see or hear this.
No.
So it's worked. It's worked very well. But what happened then was we got a call from I won't say who, but another winery not far from us, who said, have you got any storage? We've oh no, I need to go back, sorry.
Okay, well before you do, one sec, we'll come to you in a minute.
Okay.
Time to refill your glass. And ours.
So you had a call from a mysterious vineyard somewhere nearby, or was it a winery? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
No, it was another Hampshire winery.
Right.
But I need to go back slightly.
Oh, okay.
So after we planted the vineyard, what happened was one of my colleagues, Mark, who helps us raise money. He'd helped me raise money in films I've done in the past, and was bringing one or two investors to what we were looking to do.
Yeah.
And he'd spoken to Jamie at Vineyard Magazine.
Oh right. Yeah.
And Jamie's, and he told him, I've got this friend. He's a mad, director, TV, film, and everything, and he knows about wine. I admit I don't know anything about wine.
Well, you must know a little bit now.
I've got some knowledge now. Yeah,
okay.
But I know what I like to drink.
Yeah.
I'm a better drinker than I am a grower or maker.
I can second that too.
Yeah. So Mark had said to Jamie that I've got this crazy friend, and he's planted a vineyard. Not sure he knows what he's doing, but it might be a story for you.
Yeah.
Jamie decided that it was an interesting background.
Yeah.
So he came and saw us.
Yeah.
And did an interview a bit like we're doing now.
Yeah.
And photographs and stuff, and they published it in Vineyard Magazine, which I have to say is not only a great magazine. Jamie was the person that founded Vineyard Magazine.
Yes.
And I'm delighted to say has come on board as our partner in these podcasts.
Yeah.
So it is the Grapevine in association with
Vineyard Magazine.
Vineyard Magazine.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie.
Well done. And Jamie's doing a great job there. But he put the article out.
Yeah.
And a number of people read it. And we got a call, have you got any storage? Because obviously it mentioned Simon and the farm. And then we got a call from somebody who had a vineyard and said, well, are you going to be building a winery? And a few other calls along those lines. And I don't know how, but somehow my mind said, you should investigate this a little bit. Why are you getting these calls? So I looked into it. And actually, I didn't know about Defined at that point. And all the guys down there, and they do a great job. And we've got to know them. We've done some work for them and everything, and everybody gets on well. That's so the one thing I love about the British, not just British, but the worldwide wine industry.
Yeah.
And you've experienced it yourself.
Oh, totally. It's a community.
It is.
Everybody, if one person's struggling over here, they say, well, how can we help you out here? I've seen that so often on the travels.
Yeah, we've travelled around the world together, haven't we? Been to wineries.
Yeah.
Everybody is either completely nuts like us because they're so friendly.
Yeah.
Everybody's friendly, and there seems to be no secrets, as you say.
Yeah.
This winemaker will help that winemaker out and things like that.
Yeah.
And I must say, that's one of the great delights I've had in everything we've done and built here at Itasca Wines.
Yeah.
And I think if I went back to being 16, 17 again, and I had to choose a different career,
you'd do this, would you?
I would love to go into the wine industry.
Right, okay.
And it's because of the people, not so much the technology side or the wine.
But then you wouldn't have a story to tell.
No, I would. Well, I wouldn't. But yeah. So anyway, shall I?
And
get
we
back
would
to,
be here.
No, we wouldn't.
Get back on track, Malcolm.
Get back on track.
Wind it back in.
So, we got all these calls. So I started looking around, and then I spoke to Wines GB. And if you remember, you and I had been
went to see them up in
Market Harbour.
Market Harbour.
Yeah,
well
and we'd interviewed
Julia
Tristram-Eve. Before it became Wines GB, there was two separate.
Yeah, they were. Now the Wines GB.
Now it's all Wines GB.
Yeah.
So I spoke to Julia, and she said, "Well, the industry, is growing in a way that there is going to be a need for, a contract service.
Yeah.
Not quite in the same way that the French operate their cooperatives, but the result of all those chit-chats and things was that I could see an opportunity for a contract winemaking service. There were so many vines being planted and not enough wineries. And there's lots of wineries, but wineries that could take scale.
Yeah.
And I suppose it was a real gamble to build the winery the size that we have. But anyway, I somehow He doesn't really drink very much. He loves a bit of Pinot Noir, but I persuaded Simon somehow that we should knock down these old barns he had.
Yeah,
and
Simon seems to be like the long-suffering partner in this whole kind of thing.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I dragged him kicking and screaming, although he didn't know it at the time. So we built the winery, and it was initially, to make our own wine. Although we had never had major ambitions to build, a worldwide brand or anything like that. We would make some wine for ourselves, enough for family and friends, maybe sell locally. And that's still what we really do with Pencroft, our label, because the farm is Pencroft Farm. It's been Pencroft Farm for years, so it's a nice name. Let's call the wine our own brand, Pencroft. But the contract side was obviously, I think. Over the years, I've been involved in different businesses and things, mainly film, TV related. But this was an opportunity, being in the right time, the right place. And it's proved, it was the right concept. And I think we now make wine for, it's about 22, 24 different vineyards.
And you're at capacity as well, really, aren't you? You kind of...
Yeah, I mean, this 2023 harvest was a bumper harvest for everyone. So we processed 530 tonne, I think. We built the winery to a capacity of 600 tonne. But we've gone from nothing to that in 3 years, really. Because it was September 20 that we managed to open. I think we took about 40 tonne.
Right.
So in 3 years, we've gone to there.
And a little side story on that is that I always talk about, and you mentioned it, but you forgot to mention it, is that you actually built the winery during the lockdown, during the COVID.
We did.
And that in itself is a story, because despite everybody being stuck at home, you still managed to build a winery.
Yeah, I think that was a little bit of luck.
There's a lot of luck in this game.
Well, there's a lot of luck.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, some people through COVID did really, really badly. A lot of people mentally suffered. Being locked. I mean, I would watch the news, and they'd interview a mother with 3 kids in a flat in London. It was just dreadful.
It wasn't nice.
It was absolutely dreadful. But we were fortunate in the fact that we were out here, and we actually 2nd of February 20, we started the first digger to knock down the barn. And the 1st of March, lockdown came. So we'd only been going 4 weeks. We literally hadn't even cleared the site. So we had I think we had a 10 days where nothing happened. But then we realised, well, so long as you were apart, and the guy on the digger is in his cab, he's not near the guy on the dumper truck. So the trades were able to come in. And I think when I say we were lucky that the building sites had all closed down, and a lot of the skilled builders, were
looking for work or locked in their houses.
There's another Hampshire company, Apex, who are fantastic. They built, I think, about 3 or 4 wineries now. They build generally grain stores and stuff like that. Great guys, Rupert and Richard. They were fantastic, brought their crew in, and they were able to get the chippies and the electricians and everything, because they weren't, they were all available. So we were able to offer employment and go through COVID, and we managed to open so we started 2nd of February 20, we managed to open for September 20, and I think it was about 40 odd tonne we processed. In the meantime, I'd been going to talk to people in different vineyards. A few had read in magazines. Jamie again was very supportive at the Vineyard magazine. So and it's built from there.
And now we have a cellar door.
Well, one of the things that I'd learned, and I think which is great across the whole English, certainly in the south, we've picked up the Australian, New Zealand, the Californian thing about tourism. And I think the British wine industry or UK wine industry is certainly going to benefit from tourism.
Oh, for sure.
People want to come and do tours around the vineyards, the winery and things. So we'd started doing that, but we didn't, we were moving from our barrel store to our office and putting a table up in the yard and things. So we needed a home to people to do the tour, have some cheese and wine, and enjoy it. So we decided to build a cellar door, as a lot of them are called in New Zealand places.
That's a lot of the influence of the travels as well, because when you saw how they were set up, you kind of almost lifted that and went, we can do the same over here. Go on.
I heard a great thing the other day. I can't remember who said it, but it was Michael Bublé I was listening to.
Yeah.
And he was talking to somebody, and he said he was talking about his own career and how he started. He would sing, he would steal a song from Frank Sinatra,
right? And
he would sing that.
Yeah.
And the guy said to him, "Well, if you take a song from one person and steal it, that's stealing." But if you take lots of songs from lots of people, that's research.
Wow!
So it's one of those things, isn't it?
No,
so we've
that's Michael Bublé for you.
Yeah. So we've used the cellar door from Australia and California. And so it was research. We did our research.
Yeah.
And we've opened our cellar door. We were 6 months late because of the local council had laid off the planning department, so getting planning permission took longer.
Yeah.
But
there's nobody there. You're not going to get it, are you?
No, but I'm delighted to say it's been open 6 months now. It's taken a while to get the staff settled down and everything, but it's been fantastic.
Yeah.
And we're in Crondall, or we're on the outskirts of Crondall, the village. The village have been 100% supportive.
Yeah. And I will say
we're just really lucky with it.
I will recommend the cellar door. I go there for my coffee in the morning, but I had it was a ginger and Biscoff cake. Now, it was a little indulgence today for me. But if you've not had it, get down there.
Yeah.
But what about the future? What can you tell us about the future for Itasca Wines and Pencroft Wines and what you're planning?
Well, we started off talking about, it was me and my career really. I think, I've been really lucky. I have a wonderful wife, 2 great kids, lovely family. I don't, my father, bless him, he's been dead 20 years now. But he always used to say to me, even just up before he died, son, you've got to consider getting a job.
Yeah.
You need to get a career.
Yeah.
Because for him, having done a 7-year apprenticeship,
yeah,
he never understood that what I did making films was a job.
Well, yeah.
I'd never really done. I sort of did a 7-year apprenticeship by working in different departments in film and TV, but it wasn't for as a tradesman.
Yeah.
It wasn't recognised like he was.
It was like go and be a doctor.
Yeah,
right.
And I get up every morning. I'm pretty positive, to look forward to each day. And I've been lucky that everything I do or have done, I've never regarded it as work. Even my kids do take the mickey that Dad's off playing again.
Right. But that's the thing is you're doing something you're passionate about.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to do what I've always wanted to do, or been able to create a business so that I can enable myself to do those things.
Yeah.
So I'm very lucky that I've never really had a job, because everything I've done is for pleasure. It's something I've got an interest in, and I love doing. So I think I've ended up with Itasca Wines, and all the support and the great team we've got, and yourself, you're all part of it.
Yeah.
And you and I have been together through various things.
We've been through it.
Since 2009.
Yeah.
And the business has grown itself in many, many ways. I've just been the guy that's seen the opportunity and make it work. And I think with the team we've now got, we'll just carry on building the business. There's things like, the next thing related to the cellar door is we're looking at building some glamping huts.
Yeah.
And it's seeing opportunities.
Yeah.
We're only an hour's drive from the West End of London, from Hammersmith, Putney and everything. People can drive out on a Friday night, stay in some really nice, huts we're planning to build.
Yeah.
They can again go to the cellar door, drink our wines.
Yeah, and they don't have to worry about getting up and driving home because they've got glamping huts.
They'll just be round the corner, 10-minute walk from the cellar door.
Yeah.
So
will you hold one for me?
Yeah. There's a bell tent in the corner.
Oh, perfect. There you
go. But one relates to the other.
Yeah.
It's about now creating the business. And we've got a fantastic customer, Missingate, who are in Essex, and Ben our winemaker, has made some award-winning wines for them. Our Pinot Blanc that he made for Missingate was won awards. It's fantastic. And then through Nick at Missingate, the owner and his sons are all great guys, we explored maybe opening a winery for them.
Okay.
Or they wanted to open a winery to be able to process their own grapes.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons, which are all economical and things like that. That is not going to happen. But it opened our eyes to the Crouch Valley and East Anglia becoming the new UK sort of central Otago, for still wines.
Yeah.
So the south and right across the coast here is sparkling. Essex is growing a reputation for that early eastern sun in the morning.
Yeah.
For great wines for making still wine.
Yeah.
Great grapes for making still wine. Sorry. So we are now entering into opening a second winery in Essex.
Okay.
We've tied up with a few people around there already. So I suppose that East Anglia, East Coast, we're hoping to drag people into making wine in the region.
Yeah.
And so I think the future for Itasca Wines is that we'll grab every opportunity, because that's the way I work.
It is the way you work,
that we can. I've now got a leash around me because we have a board of directors that I have to answer to. It's not all me.
Oh, you can't do everything that you want now.
No, I can dream, but then I have to get it passed now.
You have to get your dreams passed by a bunch of people.
Yeah, which is the correct way.
It is.
Things have to be done correctly. We are changing to become a public company in the next month. We started the process last year. And that's really to enable us to become a PLC, will enable us to be able to go out to the market to raise future funds for some of these new crazy ideas we've got.
Yes.
And you can't continue to do that as a private company.
Yeah, it's hard to get.
Yeah. So Itasca Wines is, we've got our feet under the table. We're now 4 years old, effectively.
Yeah.
3.5, something like that.
Yeah.
I think we've now, we've got all our governance compliance in place.
Yeah.
So we're just now consolidating and building slowly.
Yeah.
But we won't be held back.
No.
We'll do what opportunities come.
Yeah.
We will explore and do what's correct.
And you've got a vineyard that's now producing fruit and making good wine, because it's 4 years of having planted. They usually take about 3 years before you can start to harvest them. And then they've got a bit of time to mature. Or whatever,
this year was our 4th year, and the vines have produced some great grapes.
Yeah.
And of course we've got 5 vineyards because we took over Jenkins Place. Simon Bladen, that owns Jenkins Place, he didn't want to continue. He ran it with his daughter, and she got married, now had a baby.
Yeah.
So family life was moving on for them, and they didn't want to rip it up. It yields very well, so we took a long-term lease on that.
Yeah.
We work in association with Paul Woodrow Hill at Vine Care.
Yeah.
They do that with us, look after that, as well as our own vineyard.
Yeah.
So it's all dropping into place really nicely.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I've got to say is thank you for coming on the podcast. I appreciate your time. We should say thank you to the sponsors. I think we've got Vin Pilot. Vin Pilot, Schrammel, Schaffenberger, and Inartis. And then on top of that, we are now sponsored by the Vineyard Magazine. Thank you very much, Jamie. I really appreciate that. And that's it for the Grapevine for this episode. If you're interested in coming on, get in touch with either Malcolm or Jamie at Vineyard Magazine or myself. You can find our details wherever. Anyone's more than welcome to come down and have a chit chat with me.
Well, I know you've got some really excited people lined up.
We do.
And the whole point of this, it was Mike. It was you that created this idea.
Oh, stop it!
Came to me and said, we've got all the equipment, on the film side. Why don't we do this?
Yeah.
But thank you again for Jamie to coming on board with us.
Yeah.
And I know you've got some really, some really lovely, talented wine-associated people coming on board.
Definitely.
I think it's a fantastic concept, Mike. I wish you all the luck with it.
Yeah.
I'll be here behind, backing you.
I'll hold you to that.
Great. Thank you to everyone for watching, listening. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
It's all over to you
It's
now,
over to
Mike.
me now. Oh,
Yeah.
oh dearie me. Anyway, cheers.
Thank you very much.
The Grapevine Podcast, sponsored by Vineyard Magazine.